March 14, 1957, 2:47 a.m. 8 men stood in the narrow hallway of 409 Edgecombe Avenue, the most prestigious address in Harlem. Vito Genovese's best shooters, armed with Thompson submachine guns and sawed-off shotguns, 8 against 1, a sleeping man. This was supposed to be simple. The lead gunman, a stone-cold killer named Carmine the Butcher Rizzo, had done this 30 times. Walk in, pull the trigger, walk out, $100,000 split 8 ways. That was the price Genovese put on Bumpy Johnson's head. And tonight, they were going to collect. Carmine kicked down the door. Splinters flew. 8 men rushed in, weapons raised, fingers on triggers. The apartment was empty. Not empty like someone had left. Empty like no one had ever been there. No furniture, no clothes, no photographs, just bare walls and the faint smell of cigar smoke. That's when they heard it. A soft click, then another, then 6 more. 8 clicks from 8 different directions. And then Bumpy Johnson's voice came from the darkness, calm as a Sunday sermon. "You boys lost?" What nobody knew, what the history books will never tell you, is that Bumpy Johnson had been waiting for Vito Genovese's men for 3 weeks. And the trap he'd set wasn't just about survival. It was about sending a message that would reshape the power structure of the entire New York underworld. If that hook got you locked in, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We're dropping these stories every single day, and trust me, this one's about to get wild. To understand what happened that night at 409 Edgecombe, you need to understand the war that had been raging between Bumpy Johnson and Vito Genovese since 1945. And you need to understand why Genovese was desperate enough to send 8 men into the heart of Harlem. By 1957, Bumpy Johnson wasn't just Harlem's most powerful figure. He was an institution. For over 2 decades, he'd built something the Italian mob couldn't comprehend. He didn't just run numbers and policy games. He ran a shadow government. When Harlem families needed help, they didn't go to City Hall. They went to Bumpy. When young black men needed jobs, Bumpy found them work. When the police got too aggressive, Bumpy made phone calls that made the harassment stop. He was equal parts gangster, politician, and guardian. His headquarters operated out of a barbershop on 125th Street, but his real office was the streets themselves. Every shoeshine boy, every bartender, every cab driver in Harlem was an ear for Bumpy. Information flowed to him like water flows downhill, natural, constant, unstoppable. And then there was 409 Edgecombe Avenue, the triple nickel, locals called it, apartment 555, the most sought-after address in Black America. Thurgood Marshall lived there. W.E.B. Du Bois had lived there. And Bumpy Johnson, when he wasn't in his other residences scattered across the borough, called it home. Vito Genovese wanted it all. Genovese had risen through the ranks of the Italian mob through pure brutality. He'd orchestrated hits on his own bosses, fled to Italy to escape murder charges, and returned to New York in 1945 with one goal: total control of the American underworld. By 1957, he was making his move to become boss of all bosses. But there was a problem: Harlem. Harlem's numbers racket generated over $50 million a year, and every penny of it flowed through Bumpy Johnson. Genovese had tried negotiation. Bumpy told him Harlem wasn't on the table. He'd tried sending soldiers to muscle in on local operations. Bumpy's men sent them back with broken bones and a message: the next ones come back in boxes. He'd tried corrupting cops to harass Bumpy's operations. Bumpy had better connections in the NYPD. For 12 years, every move Genovese made against Harlem had failed. "This man is untouchable," Genovese told his underboss, Gerardo Catena, in February 1957. "We've tried everything." Catena, a cautious man, suggested they focus on other territories. Queens was ripe. Brooklyn had opportunities. But Genovese's ego couldn't accept it. No more waiting, no more negotiating. Bumpy Johnson dies, and he dies in his own home. in his own bed, so everyone knows no one is safe from me. The planning took 6 weeks. Genovese assembled his best men, not soldiers, specialists. Carmine the butcher. Rizzo had killed 32 men for the family. Vincent the Ghost Albano could pick any lock in Manhattan. Sal Torino was an expert in explosives. The remaining 5 were seasoned gunmen who'd prove their loyalty in blood. The meeting happened at Genovese's estate in Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey. 14 men sat around a mahogany table in a room with no windows. "Here's the problem," Genovese said, spreading surveillance photographs across the table. Bumpy at his barber shop, Bumpy leaving a restaurant, Bumpy walking into 409 Edgecombe. "This man has eyes everywhere. He knows when a white face shows up in Harlem. He knows when strange cars park on his street. He knows before we even know we're coming." "So how do we get to him?" Rizzo asked. "We go when he can't see. 3 a.m., 8 men, no cars within 4 blocks. You walk in through the service entrance. The superintendent's been paid. Building's got 1 elevator and 2 stairwells. 2 men cover each exit. 4 go up to 55. 2 minutes, in and out." Rizzo studied the floor plan. "What about his bodyguards?" "He doesn't sleep with bodyguards," Genovese smiled. "That's the thing about Bumpy. He thinks Harlem protects him. He thinks he's untouchable in his own neighborhood." He leaned forward. "He's wrong." March 12, 1957, 2 days before the hit. The superintendent of 409 Edgecombe, a heavyset man named Franklin Moss, was leaving a bar on Lenox Avenue when a black Chrysler pulled up. 2 Italian men in expensive suits stepped out. "Franklin Moss?" The shorter one smiled. "We have a business proposition." They didn't waste time. $5,000 cash. "Leave the service entrance unlocked on March 14th. Go visit your sister in Philadelphia. Come back in 3 days. Tell no one." Moss looked at the money. His hands trembled. "That's Mr. Johnson's building. You know who lives there?" "We know exactly who lives there," the taller man said. "Question is, do you want to be rich and alive or poor and dead?" Moss took the money. But here's what Genovese's men didn't know. Franklin Moss had been working for Bumpy Johnson since 1949. Every month, Bumpy paid Moss $200 to report any unusual activity around the building, any strange faces, any questions about residents, anything. 2 hours after the Italians drove away, Franklin Moss was sitting in Bumpy's barbershop, $5,000 on the table between them. "They want me to unlock the service door. March 14th, 3 in the morning. Bumpy didn't react. He just nodded slowly, running his fingers along the crisp bills. "How many men?" They didn't say, but the way they talked, more than a few. Bumpy was silent for a long moment. Then he picked up one of the $100 bills and held it to the light. "You did good, Franklin. You keep this money, and you're going to do exactly what they told you. Leave that door unlocked. Go to Philadelphia, but before you go, you're going to help me with something." What happened next showed why Bumpy Johnson had survived 30 years in a business where most men didn't survive 5. Bumpy didn't call his soldiers. He didn't alert the police. He didn't run. Instead, he went to work. First, he made a single phone call to a man named Oscar Silky Henderson, who owned a moving company in the Bronx. By midnight that same night, every piece of furniture in apartment 555 had been removed. No bed, no chairs, no evidence anyone had ever lived there. Second, Bumpy visited a man named Raymond Cross, a former Army sniper who'd served in Korea and now worked as a security consultant for various Harlem businesses. Bumpy didn't need Raymond's shooting skills. He needed his access to military-grade equipment. Third, Bumpy reached out to 8 men, not gunmen, not soldiers, cleaners, men who knew how to make problems disappear. Here's what you need to understand about Bumpy Johnson. He could have killed Genovese's men anywhere. An ambush on the street, a bomb in their car, a bullet from a rooftop. But that wasn't the message he wanted to send. Kill 8 men, and Vito sends 16. Bumpy told Silky that night. But embarrass him, make him look weak in front of the other families. That's how you break a man. The plan was elegant. Genovese's men would walk into an empty apartment. They'd realize they'd been played. And before they could react, they'd find themselves surrounded by men with guns in the darkness of unfamiliar territory. But Bumpy added one more element, the cruelest element of all. He was going to be there, in the apartment, alone, unarmed. When Silky heard this, he nearly lost his mind. "Bumpy, that's suicide. 8 men with Tommy guns." "8 men who just found out their target knew they were coming," Bumpy interrupted. 8 men in a dark room they don't know. 8 men whose whole plan just fell apart. Fear makes men stupid, Silky, and stupid men don't shoot straight. March 14th, 1957. 2:43 a.m. Carmine Rizzo led his team through the service entrance like ghosts. Moss had done his job. The door was unlocked, the hallway was empty. They moved in practiced silence, hand signals, controlled breathing, shoes wrapped in cloth to muffle footsteps. 2 men positioned at the service entrance, 2 at the main stairwell, 2 at the elevator, 2 with Carmine heading up to the 5th floor. They'd rehearsed this a dozen times. Kick the door, spray the bedroom, confirm the kill. 90 seconds, start to finish. Carmine reached apartment 555. He pressed his ear to the door. Silence. He looked at his partner, a veteran named Tony Two Fingers Perrone. Tony nodded. They'd done this before. They knew the rhythm. Carmine kicked the door. The wood splintered. Both men rushed in, Thompsons raised, ready to cut down everything that moved. Nothing moved. The apartment was empty. Completely, impossibly empty. No furniture, no fixtures, just bare floors and moonlight through bare windows. "What the hell?" Tony started. Click. The sound came from behind them. Then another click, from the left, then 2 more from the shadows. "You boys lost?" Bumpy Johnson stepped out of the darkness. He wore a 3-piece suit, perfectly pressed, as if he'd dressed for a dinner party. No weapon in his hands, no fear in his eyes. Carmine's finger tightened on the trigger. "Don't move." "I'm not going anywhere," Bumpy said, "but neither are you." That's when Carmine noticed the red dots, 8 of them, dancing on his chest, on Tony's chest, on the chests of every one of Genovese's men throughout the building. Laser sights, military equipment, the kind you couldn't buy on the street. "Your men at the exits are already secured," Bumpy continued, his voice calm, conversational. "The ones by the elevator tried to run. They didn't get far. That leaves you 2. Tony's gun was shaking. "You're bluffing," Bumpy smiled. "Son, I've been in this game since before you could walk. You think I'd stand in an empty room with 2 armed men if I wasn't absolutely certain how this ends?" He took a step forward. Neither gunman moved. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to put those guns on the floor. Then you're going to walk out of this building. Then you're going to deliver a message to Vito Genovese." "And if we don't?" Carmine growled, but his voice cracked. Bumpy's smile faded. His eyes went cold. The coldest Carmine had ever seen. "Then my men turn this apartment into a graveyard, and I send your heads back to Jersey in a hat box. Your choice." The guns clattered to the floor. 20 minutes later, 8 Italian hitmen stood in a line on the roof of 409 Edgecombe Avenue. Their weapons had been taken. Their pride had been stripped. And Bumpy Johnson stood before them like a judge about to deliver a sentence. Surrounding them were a dozen of Bumpy's men, armed with everything from revolvers to rifles. There was no escape. There was no negotiation. There was only Bumpy's word. "Look around you," Bumpy said, gesturing at the Harlem skyline. "This is my home. These streets, these buildings, these people. Mine. Your boss thought he could send killers into my neighborhood, into my building, into my home." He walked slowly down the line, looking each man in the eye. "I could kill all of you. I should kill all of you. but dead men don't talk, and I need you to talk." He stopped in front of Carmine. "You're going back to New Jersey, all 8 of you, and you're going to tell Vito Genovese exactly what happened here. You're going to tell him Bumpy Johnson knew. You're going to tell him every move he makes in Harlem, I see it before he makes it, and you're going to tell him this." Bumpy leaned in close, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "Harlem buries its own." He stepped back. "Now get out of my building, and pray I never see any of your faces again." The 8 men filed down the stairs and out into the cold March night. None of them ever returned to Harlem, except Franklin Moss, the superintendent, the landlord, who walked out behind them, shaking his head at the men who'd tried to bribe him. The only man from either side who walked out of that building unchanged that night. Word spread through the underworld like fire through dry brush. By dawn, every connected man from Boston to Baltimore had heard the story. Vito Genovese sent 8 gunmen to kill Bumpy Johnson, 8 of his best. They came back empty-handed, humiliated, carrying a message. Bumpy knew. The other family bosses took notice. If Genovese couldn't touch one man in Harlem, how could he claim to control New York? The whispers started. Maybe Genovese wasn't as powerful as he thought. Maybe his reach wasn't as long as he claimed. Genovese called an emergency meeting with his top captains. The room was thick with cigar smoke and shame. "He knew," Carmine said quietly. "He was waiting for us, standing in an empty room like he was expecting company. He had snipers on every exit. We never had a chance." Genovese's face was purple with rage. How? How did he know? No one had an answer. Because the answer was simple. Bumpy had built something Genovese couldn't understand. Not a gang, not an army, a community. And in that community, everyone was family. And family doesn't betray family. 2 weeks later, Genovese quietly withdrew his operations from all Harlem-adjacent territories. No announcement, no explanation. He simply stopped trying. Bumpy Johnson went back to his barbershop, back to his numbers games, back to protecting his people. He lived another 11 years, dying in 1968, not from a bullet, but from a heart attack. He'd outlasted Dutch Schultz. He'd outlasted Lucky Luciano. He'd outlasted every man who ever tried to take Harlem from him. Here's what Bumpy proved that night at 409 Edgecombe. Power isn't about how many guns you have. It's about knowing what's coming before your enemy does. It's about building something so deep in your community that betrayal becomes impossible. It's about understanding that the most devastating victory isn't the one that kills your enemy. It's the one that makes them kill their own reputation. 8 men walked into Bumpy Johnson's building armed for war. They walked out carrying nothing but shame. And the only person who came out unchanged was the landlord, because he'd been Bumpy's man all along. If this story got you hyped, smash that subscribe button right now. We're dropping Bumpy Johnson stories every single day. Leave a comment and let me know. What would you have done in that empty apartment? Would you have let those 8 men walk? And turn on notifications because next week, we're telling the story of how Bumpy Johnson walked into a police precinct surrounded by dirty cops and walked out with every one of them on his payroll. Remember, in Harlem, respect isn't given, it's earned, and Bumpy Johnson earned his every single day.